Is inflation still wrecking your retirement confidence? This week on the podcast, we're going to talk about a new survey that came out and see how it relates to what Phil's seeing, and does it really truly affect your retirement confidence? Let's get into it this week here on the show. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Phil and I as we talk investing, finance, retirement. Phil, inflation is better, but not where we hoped it would be. But it is improving. So
it's moving in the right direction. So yeah, that is really the key with inflation. So, but I mean, most people don't feel like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and because we forget that it is cumulative, right? So we've got years, unfortunately, years of it stacking at pretty high numbers, or at least months, right? And then in some years. And so therefore, and we've talked about it before, companies aren't willing to give the money back. So if they can charge you, if they've been charging you $5 for milk, they're going to keep doing it.
It does. Yeah. It doesn't go back.
Yeah, exactly. But we got this Schwab survey that Schwab did put out. And so we'll put a link in the show descriptions for people to check that out if they'd like to. And I'm going to give you some of the statistics that I thought were interesting and let you kind of riff on those and kind of tell us what you're seeing and some things to think about and just kind of how it might relate, again, towards the retirement side of things. Sure. Is it messing or wrecking confidence in retirement spending, right? So 57% say inflation is their biggest obstacle to retirement. I mean, I think it's totally fair. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair because of where we have been, right? What we just recently went through. So, I mean, there's something called recency bias, which all of us have, right? We remember what most recently happened. So we just went through 2022 where we had these huge spikes of inflation, it hit over 9%. And yeah, it's come down dramatically from there. I think we're now at 2.7, somewhere in that range. Right. So I mean, at the end of the day, we're moving in the right direction. It's still not at the target of 2% that the Fed has, but it's moving towards that. But we all tend to look back to what just happened and that, I don't want to say taints, but definitely weighs heavier on our decisions currently than kind of the long-term average.
Yeah.
So the important key to me here is really look at the long term, right? And have that right perspective. Like everything, you're going to have these ebbs and flows. I mean, it's funny. It's no different than what happens in the market, right? After 2008, everyone's panicked, very concerned with the market, because that's what you just went through. But then 2009 and beyond, things have just taken off and grown from there. But
I think people,
the early years after that, though, I mean, you were some people very gun shy because of what just happened in a market. So it's kind of the same thing.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Oh,
I see
man,
what you're
we
saying.
just had 9% inflation. That's going to continue forever. No, it's not.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
The reality of inflation is this. If you look at a 20-year historical average, 2.5 to 2.7 is what it's been.
Yeah.
So the challenge that we face is we had 10 plus years leading up to this of 2% inflation on average or below, and all of a sudden with this huge spike, and it was a shock to the system. So,
and again, it's cumulative, right? And so,
yes, cumulative, right? But everything's cumulative.
It's tough, right? And it's tough. Look, I mean, we can all go out to the stores and things right now, and still realize that it's brutal in a lot of places, and different things are worse than others, right? But we are seeing improvements. I think obviously a lot of us know, transportation, as that continues to come down, that helps a lot of things. And it's been, I don't know about in your neck of the woods, Phil, but it's been crazy here. Like every 2 days, it's wild swings. It's now it's all the way to 245 the other day. I was like, woohoo, baby, 245.
We haven't seen that yet. So.
But then like 2 days later, it was, 299, and then it was back to, 250 like 2 days after that. So it's been like these really wild swings. So very interesting stuff. So that was the first statistic.
So go ahead. At the end of the day, the importance is number one, have a financial plan, right? And part of that plan should be inflation. What are your inflation assumptions? Yeah. Just because we just had a 9%, higher inflation level doesn't mean you need to build that into the plan, because that's not reality. We go through these spikes and ebbs and flows. I mean, it's the same thing with the stock market, right? Yeah. I mean, if you look at the S&P as an example, I was just looking up some historical numbers on that. So historically, since 1957, it's averaged 10.3%. The last 30 years, it's averaged 9. Last 20 years, it's averaged 8. Okay. But what did we just go through? 2024 was 25, 23 was 26%. This year we're at 10%.
Right.
Which should be, number one, kind of an aside. That's a concern, because I always tell clients, anytime you've earned more than the long-term average, you're borrowing from the future. At some point, it's going to come back.
Yeah.
The market side is not a good side. The inflation side is a good side. Remember, we had a 9% inflation, but average is 2.5%. Let's say it's going to come back down towards that over time. It ebbs and flows.
Gotcha.
Another thing to keep in mind too, we just went through that, but yet you did have pretty significant increases in your cost of living on Social Security, right? 22, you got 5.9% for retirees. 23, you had 8.7%. This year it's dropped down to kind of a normal 2.5% or 2.3%. So, it's not all bad news. Don't get sucked in by the headlines of, I'm not going to be able to retire now because inflation's, going to be 8% forever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, we do have some good news in this report. So I'll jump around a little bit here and we'll talk about some of that. So this one, you can kind of look at this one a couple of ways. So it says 4 in 10 people are buying less or opting for cheaper products to maintain their 401k contributions. Now, to me, that's already a positive. So it's like, okay, we're going to buy less or buy cheaper so we can keep putting money away for retirement. That's a good sign. That's a good thing. That's a good habit, if nothing else.
Yeah, again, keeping that long-term perspective of, hey, I still want to retire at some point. Even though you had these massive inflation numbers, your salary probably didn't go up by that much.
Right.
So there might be, quote unquote, a shortfall at this point. Well, that just leads to a decision you have to make. If you want to continue exactly the same lifestyle, then maybe you don't have to, you don't contribute as much to the 401k long term. That's not probably a good option. So again, it's always having that long-term perspective in play.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of the Tax Smart Retiree right now.
Yeah, and be careful with the buying cheaper. Like if you want to buy less and live within your means, I think we all should strive for that anyway, right? But just be careful with cheaper, because sometimes cheaper comes back to bite you, right?
Cheaper isn't always better. So
yeah. 34% feel very likely to meet retirement goals. That sounds good, but that's down almost 10% from the prior survey. So again, confidence is a little waning.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of relates to that first statistic of, we've just gone through this high inflation time frame, and that's our most recent experience. So people are probably feeling a little more uncomfortable about the long-term future. So
yeah. Well, check us out. So again, along the lines of some good news, 401k loans and hardship withdrawals are down 5% from the prior year. So down from 26 down to 21. Still a little high probably for your taste as a professional, but it's a good sign, right?
Absolutely. Last place you go. But it's a good sign in that people are moving away from the 401k money. That money, the retirement money, should be kind of walled off. Don't absolute last resort, change lifestyle first before you start doing that, because you're borrowing from your future, and it may dramatically change what retirement looks like. So
very true. And then finally, less people are saying they'll need more than $1 million saved in order to retire. I guess this could be, again, two ways of looking at it. Yeah. They think they need more, which is probably the case, or they're maybe just not focusing on the, hopefully they've been listening to our show and they're like, don't get hung up on the number and find out what you actually need. But we'll hope.
Yeah. I was going to say that relates to a couple of shows ago where we talked about the numbers, a data input in the whole process, right? So, it is not what retirement's about. It's not hitting whatever that number is. It's relevant to everything else that goes on. How much do I need? What is inflation assumptions? What are my growth assumptions? What kind of incomes do I have? All these different components play into ultimately then what is the number I would need to make all that work. So again, kind of relating to the uncertainty now that people are feeling about retirement because of inflation. My guess, would be they probably, if they thought they needed $1 million, it's probably a little higher than that now, which would make sense. Everything has increased in cost over time. So
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So what do? Right? Well, you run the numbers, right?
Absolutely.
Especially if you're a retiree or pre-retiree, you're getting close. You're like, hey, I'm worried inflation is chipping away at this. Am I going to still be okay? Well, if you don't have a plan and a strategy, A, you're not going to know. B,
Right.
even if you do and you're still feeling a little unsure, I'm sure a financial professional would say, okay, well, let's rerun that math for you and see how you're feeling, right?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, that is the reality is you have to have a plan, right? Otherwise, you're kind of shooting in the dark, so to speak. You don't know really what this is. And it leads to overreaction and maybe concern where there isn't concern.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done that for several clients this year. We'll be doing more as we get through the year and doing our reviews towards the end of the year and Roth conversions. We are rerunning plans based on current numbers. So just like we talked about, in our planning, we use a certain base level assumption of growth, pretty conservative at 5%. Well, the reality is accounts have done significantly more than that this year, over the last couple of years. So at the end of the day, you've got to look at where you at today. From this point going forward, what happens in the past is the past. We can't change that. Where you at today? What's the balances in the accounts today? Maybe you have to bump what you think you're going to need to spend in retirement from this point. Now use that 20-year inflation average from there and see, does it still work? And for clients that we've done that for, it still works. The numbers are different than what it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago when maybe we put the plan together. But that's how planning works. A plan is never that, well, this is the number. The plan said this. No, that's a roadmap on that day. The next day, it's out of date. You have to keep it updated on a regular basis, reanalyze and look year over year as life happens, as inflation and markets and tax law changes, all these things affect the plan.
Yeah.
Are we still good? Do we need to make, and the key there is, do we need to make minor adjustments now based on what's happened versus don't look at it for 10 years and now you're looking at it and now you probably have to make, or could have to make major adjustments. So.
Well, and I think you just hit on the piece right there too, right? Is sometimes, especially something as stark as what inflation has been, is that it's in your face and it sucks, right? So you're going and buying stuff and it's just slapping you. So therefore, it's easy to kind of have that recency bias and get all uptight about it. We know there's some stuff out there that's just not cool, right? But we're going in the right direction. Hopefully, it just kind of keeps getting better. But what you can do, because we can't control the inflation, we don't have any way of stopping it. Then go run your numbers and see where you're at and see how you stand to try to help alleviate some of that stress, because it's certainly one that you don't want to carry if you don't have to, right?
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's going to do it this week for the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us as always. Don't forget, check with a qualified professional. Phil is a CPA and a personal financial specialist. Before you take any action on something you hear on our podcast or any other, always run your numbers. Get the data. Make sure it's the correct information for you and your specific situation. And you can reach out to Phil for that complimentary consultation. You can get that financial blueprint of your own simply by clicking on the link that we have in the show descriptions and getting some time onto Phil's calendar. You can find him online at philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. You can call the number 248-888-7530, 248-888-7530, or again, just click on the links below in the show descriptions. Don't forget to subscribe to us here on YouTube and, of course, on Apple and Spotify in audio form as well. Phil, my friend, thanks for hanging out, breaking it down. I'll see you next week.
Take care.
We'll catch you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and other retirement facts.
Phil?
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.